I overheard a question before about Rosh Hashanah for the trees. We have a Rosh Hashanah already, right? Rosh Hashanah, the main one. So just basically, why is there another new year for trees? And why is it tonight? So just to answer that question, the basic question. Oh, you know what? I'll ask my wife to speak. She can. I have a good excuse. I'm from Australia. Give me a pass. I'm from Melbourne, Australia. We did learn French for 2 years, but I wasn't listening in class. So I'll try and speak slowly. It should be understood. Is that okay?
Yes.
If there's any word you don't know, please, you indicate and the rest of you will translate. All right. So just basic information to begin with. In Israel, a Jewish farmer had to separate mandatory tithes and other contributions from all his produce. Grain, fruit, vegetable, even animals. Now, the Torah says, for example, you have to give 10% to the poor or to the Levite. So you have to give 10% of that year's produce. You can't say, I'll wait a few years and then after a few years add up the 10% and then give it. Each year has to be tithed from its own unique produce, which raises the question, when does the year begin and when does the year end? Vegetables have their own beginning. Different things that grow have their own seasons. So in general, fruit is like this. Anything which buds from tonight and on belongs to the new year. Anything which had budded before tonight is calculated in the produce of the previous year. And that's a reflection of the natural season. Because by this time, most of the water that's required for the trees has fallen and been absorbed. And this is the demarcation point for the new year. Clear? All right. Did that answer your question? Because it's the Rosh Hashanah, the beginning point for fruit, so there's another association on this night, which you've been doing, really, at your Seder, which means order. We're talking about Israel, we're talking about produce, so it calls to mind another commandment. There's another commandment related to the fruits of the land of Israel. It's called the mitzvah of bikurim. And basically it is as follows. There are seven species that the land of Israel is praised and blessed with. And the Jewish farmer once a year would bring a little bit of each one of these seven and bring it to Jerusalem and thank God for the gift of Israel. Now that wasn't done this time of year. That's done in the summer. But since we're celebrating now the new year for trees, we naturally think about all those mitzvot, all those commandments that are connected to the produce, the agriculture of Israel. And so it's a custom to have a Seder tonight and partake of all seven species that Israel is praised with and have a special status in Jewish law. These seven species have a special status in terms of their blessings, different to anything else that we would eat. What are the seven species? I think you have them listed here. They are wheat, barley, grapes, figs, pomegranates, olives, and dates. Was that seven?
Yes.
I think so, yeah. Better be, because I don't know any more. So these are the seven species, and I wanted to talk a little bit about the seven species and this spiritual message. I heard the rabbi say earlier, quoting from the Torah, a man's compared to a tree in the field, much to be learned from nature. In fact, the human being is a microcosm of the entire universe. All that exists in nature exists within us in some way, some subtle way. Let me start with a little story. Once upon a time, there was a princess, a little older than you, because this princess was already ready to get married. She was very beautiful and very talented. Problem was that the suitors who came to seek her hand were not really up to par. And so she just wasn't interested in this one or the other or the third. But she's getting older. She's the only child of the king and the queen. There has to be a continuation. So, sitting down with her father, the king, and her mother, the queen, they decide, look, and she agrees reluctantly, because there's no choice, look, the next person that seeks your hand, you marry. That's it. She agrees, because she's got to get married and see what happens. So as Providence would have it, the word kind of got out that the next person that comes knocking on the palace door will marry the princess. Who should show up but a simple peasant? But he's the next guy to come. And the deal's a deal. And so they marry. Now he was a simple fellow, but he was well-to-do. He had a big estate, a big farm. And soon after their marriage, first he can't believe his luck. He's got the beautiful princess. She's the envy of the world, of every guy, and he has married her. He is elated and ecstatic. But that soon gives way to a kind of sadness because he realizes she's not happy. His wife isn't happy. Why isn't she happy? He's a simple fella. She must be hungry. That's got to be the reason. Why is a person unhappy? They're hungry. So after realizing this epiphany, this discovery, the next morning at the breakfast table, piled high with tomatoes and potatoes and bread and fruits, my darling, it's all for you. And she pokes at it and she's trying to be nice and she eats a bit and he's looking to see if there's a glimmer of happiness now. No, it's not the tomatoes and potatoes. What could it be? I told you he had money, right? He was quite successful. All right, so clothes. Maybe that's what she's missing. So he goes to Holt Renfrew. And he buys these gorgeous gowns for fainting. The next morning she comes down in this sequined gown fit for a princess. And he's looking at her to see if there's some glimmer of, now I'm happy. He looks deeply into her eyes and, no, still not happy. So it's not the tomatoes and potatoes. She's got food she can't even or ever eat. It's not the clothes. What could it be? Scratching his head, simple kind of guy. I know. It's the whole environment. It's the house. I told you he had money, right? So he hires architects. He re-landscapes the whole beautiful gardens, rebuilds the house. He makes a home that would be featured in House and Garden. The envy of the entire province. That's the kind of home and the garden he makes for him. When it's all done and spends a fortune on it, he takes her to tour. My love, the garden, the dining room, the living room, the beautiful home, the mansion, the palace, it's all for you. And he's looking into her eyes, I think you can guess the rest, to see whether there's, now I'm finally happy, and you guessed it. It's that same sad look. Now he's at his wit's end. And he says to her, turns to her in frustration, love of my life. He says, you have food that you could never eat, clothes he bought lots of stuff that she'll never even get to wear, a home that's the envy of the province, and you're still not happy. And then he does the craziest thing. He asks her why. Why not? What's missing? She looks at him and she says, you know where I come from? The palace. And she begins to describe life in the palace. the music, art, the philosophers, the culture of the palace. She describes, he listens, and the curtain falls. That's the end of the story. This is a story in the Talmud. Of course, it's a parable. This is what the Talmud is telling us. The princess is our soul, our neshama. The peasant is the body. They marry. They fuse. You see, being alive, we're not machines. Our machines aren't alive. They're animated by energy, but they're not alive. Your phone isn't alive. Your car isn't alive. It's just propelled by electricity, by energy. But not so with the body and the soul. The soul actually fuses with the body and becomes inseparable during our life. So what happens is, friends, at some point in life, we look in the mirror and we say, you're not happy. That image reflecting back to me, there's a sadness. I'm just not happy. So why aren't they happy? I know. It's the food, the diet. If I ate well, I'll feel good. If I lose the weight, put on the weight, then I'm going to be happy. So go to this whole diet food thing, change our whole diet, we read up and the latest theories and discoveries, and after it's all done, and we lost whatever the weight, or put on, if that the case may be. And then we look in the mirror in the morning and it's that same sad look is staring back at me. No, so it's not the food. I know what it is. It's my image, clothing. So we get glossy magazines. If I just look like him or like her, then I'd be happy. So we change the whole image, the whole look. Like this. And we think that's going to bring me happiness. And after going through that whole wardrobe, look, style, change, nothing really changes. There's still this emptiness inside. All right, it's not my food, not the clothes. You know, it's where I live. It's where I live. The house, the car. Change the house, change the car, change the city, change the job. If I change my environment, then I'll be happy. So we go through all of that and then we figure we're crazy. And this is when the psychiatrists, they make their money. Got to make a living. What's wrong with me? Why aren't I happy? Food, clothing, a nice home, decent job. Most people in the world will give their right arm for this. And I'm still not happy. So you go to the shrink. So this story tells us, no. You're not well. I'm not sick. Not even mentally or emotionally. What's the story here? My soul is the princess. My body is the peasant. I'm trying to satisfy, the peasant is trying to satisfy the princess's needs with the peasant stuff. And that's not what she's longing for. I'm looking for a piece of the palace of heaven. I'm looking for a relationship with God. I'm looking for spirituality. I'm looking for sanctity, for holiness. And I try to feed it with things. And the more things I get, it doesn't change anything because that's not where the hunger is coming from. In fact, the crazy thing is, the body, the peasant, is happy with very little. Roof over our heads, warm when it's cold outside, maybe air conditioning when it's hot outside. You know, the basic needs. This drive more and more and more is because we're missing the signals are crossing. The soul and the body become one. It's the soul that's calling out. We're trying to answer it with the body's needs, when that's not where that cry is coming from to begin with. So I'm telling you this story, friends, because that's really the story of the first species, fruits, that we eat and celebrate tonight on Tu B'Shvat. Remember, wheat, and then barley, 2 staple grains, and then 5 fruits. What do they represent? Wheat, traditionally, is the food of the human being. Barley, traditionally, is animal fodder. I need to add something. I'm sure you're familiar with this idea. You teach Tanya here, I'm sure, and Chassidut, right? Yeah? So you will. Good. When I talk about, friends, the peasant, the body, I don't just mean the physical flesh. That's just physical flesh. You see, we have 2 souls, friends. In Kabbalah, we are taught we have not 1, but 2 souls. A godly soul, which we call the neshama, which is a part of God. And just saying the words godly soul makes us appreciate that this is the part of me that seeks, it's the princess, that seeks a relationship with God, that's selfless, that seeks the truth, that wants to serve. And I also have, each one of us, the animal soul, which animates the body. Now we call it animal soul not because it's a brute, but like the animal, a sophisticated animal, all they want is basically the pursuit of pleasure and the distance from pain. And it's not complicated. As we said before, the body just wants to be respected, taken care of, healthy, warm, dry, clean, nourished. That's the basic needs of my body / animal soul, which animates it. So Tu B'Shvat is saying, inasmuch that we are compared to fruits in the tree, and we are a microcosm of all of nature, the first species is wheat. Again, represents the higher part of me, my godly soul. I have to acknowledge I have a godly soul within me. That's the deepest part of me. That's my essence. That's the princess within me that seeks a relationship with God. And to address that, to hear her voice, and to nourish her. It's not enough just to address my godly soul. My body and animating soul is also a creation of God, and also has to be addressed, because in the end, even the peasant, which is the animal soul of the body, is looking for meaning. Even the human part of me is looking for meaning. As I said before, all the things that we acquire and get because we want more and more and more, we're really just torturing ourselves, because those things don't help us. Our physical needs are really simple. The problem in life is we're getting more physical stuff because we're trying to answer a spiritual need. But Tu B'Shvat brings us this awareness and understanding, putting on the table all of the components of what makes us up, so we can understand what I'm feeling. There's my godly soul that wants spirituality, and my animal soul and body. Simple needs, that's all. Basic health, make a living. This endless quest for more is not coming really from the animal soul body. It's because I'm not addressing the princess within me. And if I have this understanding, right there I've got the recipe for a meaningful, satisfying life. And I won't have this constant need for another gadget, another dollar, another thing, and a better car, a nicer car. I'm satisfying that deep drive appropriately, which is really the soul, by spirituality. We're clear? So these are the first 2 species, the wheat and the barley, and they address what makes us up fundamentally, our godly soul and our body / animal soul. And they're the 2 primary components of the 7 species. Bread. And then we have 5 fruits. And the 5 fruits are there to augment the great mission to nurture our soul and our body. Wheat and the barley, 5 fruits. So help me, friends. What are the 5 fruits again? The first one was grapes. After grapes comes figs. After the figs comes the pomegranates. then the olives, and finally the dates. So in the few minutes we have left, I'd like to share with you just very briefly what these 5 fruits now represent. They're 5 components that we need to live successful lives, lives that address my soul and my body. The wheat and the barley. Actually, you mentioned this earlier when you were taking the grapes and the wine. Joy. Wine is the symbol of joy. Every joyous occasion, it's with wine. Kiddush Friday night, the chuppah, the brit milah, circumcision. Every Yom Tov Chagim, every joyous occasion is wine. So wine represents simcha. Joy. You know what joy does? It opens us up. If a person's in a joyous frame of mind, why should I be joyous? Because you created me. I have the privilege to serve you and carry out you, dear God, your mission here on earth. Right there is the ultimate joy. Wake up alive in the morning. You trust me. You love me so much. You give me life every day. So joy, and you know what joy does? It opens us up. Everything, my mind, my heart, all of my faculties, if I'm in a joyous frame of mind, it opens and intensifies. We become alive. What happens when you drink wine, friends? When you drink wine, nichnas yain, when wine goes in, what comes out? The secrets come out. That's symbolic of the depth of me being expressed, not being bottled up, which is the cause of all kinds of anxiety. But to liberate my inner self, that's what joy does. We're familiar here with Hebrew, the Hebrew language a bit, just an interesting aside here. See, every Hebrew letter is a number. So just do this math. Hebrew word for wine is yayin. Yud, Yud, Nun. Each letter is a number, so Yud is 10. Yud is 10 again so far. We have 20. Nun is 50. Altogether, 70. Very good. Go to the top of the class. 70. So that's the word for wine. Now the word for secret, sod. Samach is 60. Vav is 6. So far is what? And Daled, Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Daled. Daled is 4, which equals 70. So the 2 words have the same numerical value. This is often the case in many words in the Holy Tongue, because when the wine goes in, the secrets come out. And by that we mean, again, the joy of life to be fully expressed and to open up. And that's what joy does. So that's the first fruit is joy. Wine. What was this? Grapes. The next fruit? Figs. Do you know when figs first appear in our history? In the history of the world. In Bereshit. That tree of knowledge in the Garden of Eden, that Adam and Chava, Adam and Eve were told, don't eat that now. At the end they did. That was in fact the fig tree. That's what it was. It wasn't an apple. It was the fig tree. What does the Torah say? Because if you eat it, so you will know that which you're not ready to know right now. The truth is, if they would have contained themselves and not eaten it and waited, they were created Friday afternoon. They had to wait only till Shabbat and then eat it. But they wanted it too early, too premature, and that brought disaster. Had they waited, then this tree of knowledge would have been the greatest gift. So what does this mean, knowledge? It's called Eitz HaDa'at, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Just very briefly, the Hebrew word for knowledge, da'at, means to connect. To connect. When the Torah describes man and woman coming together, it's called da'at, to connect. And so they were just too early in eating this fruit. But the idea which it represents, the fig, is when we learn something, we need to internalize it, connect to it. That's what da'at means, to connect. It means when you talk to somebody else, you're not just hearing, but you're connecting. Empathy, connecting. That's da'at. That's the next key or fruit for a successful life. The first one was joy, and the second was empathize, connect. When you're doing something, be in it fully. That's what the word da'at means. It doesn't just mean knowledge, it means to become one. Clear? So that's the second thing. Joy and connect. Next fruit was what? After the pomegranate. That's a very interesting fruit, friends. If you look at the pomegranate, so it has lots of these little, I guess, what are they? Seeds? No. Seeds. Yeah? But you notice they're all wrapped in their own little individual sack. What I'm going to share with you now just is that this is like the opposite of da'at. Da'at means to connect, internalize. Da'at is saying, don't do something unless it's really you. Connect, become one with that which you're learning. Take ownership. But here, sometimes, however, the balance to that is, each seed is in its own little sack, independent of the fruit, kind of. Right? There's the fruit and the seeds inside, but wrapped in its own sack. What's the message here? Sometimes we have to say, you know what, even though maybe I'm not so, and I'm not so perfect and so spiritual, but I'm going to do the mitzvah because it's the right thing to do, even if I'm not holding there yet fully. There are times you've got to take the leap and do the mitzvah, even if I haven't really internalized it, fully understand it. I'm at the level where I should be doing this. I'm not religious, I'm not this, I'm not that, so why should I do this mitzvah? So the pomegranate tells us, each mitzvah is its own little individual, self-contained sack. You can do it even if it isn't part of your life integrated fully till now. Shouldn't stop you from doing the right thing. It's kind of the balance to da'at, which is connect. Sometimes you got to do even if I'm not at that level yet. All right, next fruit. So we did the grapes, we did the grapes, we did the figs and the pomegranates, and now the olives. What's the message of the olive? Friends, the message of the olive is the olive only produces its oil, how? When it's crushed. We're going to face in life all kinds of tests that crush us, but we have to know it's all part of our growth. Embrace the challenges and know that the challenges are at the end. God is putting me through this and I feel like I'm being squeezed, but in the end, that's what brings out the oil which produces light and warmth. So that's the key to remember. The crushing moments in life ultimately are all part of the plan and not to lose sight. Now the opposite of the olive, and now we come to the date. The date. You know what the date is symbolic of? And I heard you say this before too. The date is symbolic of the tzaddik, the righteous, who is always serene and calm, kind of the opposite again of the olive that's being crushed. The date, there's certain trees that take 70 years to produce the date. Slowly, methodically, and finally the date appears. So there also has to be in our lives moments of tranquility and peace and calm. At the same time that we are being crushed by the olive, we tap into a deep place of calm, of serenity, deep down knowing that we are all tzaddik, deep down knowing we are all pure and righteous. This is just a little bit of some of the messages of Tu B'Shvat. But perhaps the most important and critical one is, life is about growth. The tree is always growing. Fascinatingly, we know that every year that a tree grows, it adds a ring. The oldest trees in the world, you know where they are? The redwood forests of California. And guess what? Cutting these massive trees, they're so massive, they've built, cars can drive through the trunk of the tree. They counted how many rings these trees have, and guess what? It's like 6,000, the age that the Torah says the world is. It's the only hardcore living entity that is that old that we can actually count and see how old it is by the rings. And how old is it? It's as old as the Torah says the world is old. There's no living thing that points to the age of the world as the Torah does like this. Everything else, friends, carbon, this is just a separate discussion, but carbon dating and fossil, that's all based on all kinds of assumptions to get these numbers like millions, hundreds of millions of years. It's based on, for example, that radioactivity in the air is that being constant, the same amount. If it wasn't in the past, it throws off the entire carbon dating. The only thing we have really hardcore is count the rings, 6,000 years old. That's just a fascinating, observance. But what I'm saying is that the tree is always growing. So the sign of life is, friend, that we are always growing. We can be young in age, but if I decide, this is me, I'm not going to improve, I'm not changing, I could be 15 and very old if I gave up on me and if I'm not growing. And I could be 95, I met someone yesterday who was 97, on Friday. Actually her birthday, in my Maimonides, she was celebrating her 97th birthday. Dressed up, full of spunk, children coming from locally from Toronto. She was young. She was truly young because in our conversation I could see that she was curious about life still and still growing. So if I'm growing, I remain eternally young. That is the essence really of the message of we're compared to a tree. Never be satisfied with this is as clever as I'm going to be, this is as righteous, as pious, as good, as kind, as nice. Always expanding and always growing. And finally, we look at the tree, we see the following. There's the roots that we don't see, but the roots are even bigger than the tree itself. And then there's the trunk, the branches, and finally the fruit. These three components, maybe you mentioned this before, you were studying that, I'm getting some, you've been talking about this, so there's faith which is very deep and can be defined or qualified. Why do I believe? Why? Because there is a God. Why does God exist? There's no answer to that. He is. Faith defies logic and reason. That's the foundation. And then the trunk and the branches, that's our learning, that's our maturity, our growing. And the final accomplishment is the fruit that somebody else can benefit from and enjoy, impact the world, make a difference, share with others. That's the crowning accomplishment of the tree, is that somebody else benefits. And in that fruit is a seed for another tree, as you mentioned earlier, and so forever. So dear friends, again, thank you for this wonderful opportunity. I wish you all a happy Tu B'Shvat. May we all grow in all good things and besimcha, and all of the challenges, realize it's all for the good. It hurts a bit, but in the end, it'll bring out the date. The final one is the date. Tranquility, peace, innocence, and a beautiful life for each one of us, and may we merit without delay Mashiach's coming, and then we'll be all reunited with our loved ones in our homeland, and it'll be peace for the Jewish people and for the whole world forever. Thank you. Amen.
Thank you, Rabbi New. More than a year ago, when I met Rabbi New, it was my 35th birthday in MTC. So I told him it's my birthday today. So I don't know, we were talking about coming here for a conference. He said this is going to be your birthday gift for you 35. Now I'm already 36, but thank you very much for this birthday gift. At least it's a gift that everyone can enjoy. I hope you enjoyed the conference. I gotta try to tell over the conference. The only thing I have a hard time to pronounce, hot rain through. I always had a hard time to. I don't know if I pronounce well.
You have to go there more often. That's all.
They close in this round, This Saturday they had one, they just closed. So, you have a question, Samuel? Quelle est la question?
English, please, Samuel.
English, Samuel. Que English. Allez, vas-y, en français. Vive le Québec. Ouais, c'est bon. C'est bon. Quelle est la question?
La question, je suis bien d'accord avec ce qu'il y a dans le CD de Shivat.
D'accord.
On compare les juifs et tout ça. C'est très bon. C'est le Mishpat, c'est l'année, c'est le renouveau, c'est le printemps.
Ouais.
Et puis, ce qu'on a dans la Torah, on dit de la terre d'Israël, on dit Eretz, Zabat, Halav, vache. C'est une terre où coule le lait et le miel, elle est définie comme ça. Et alors, pourquoi on ne mentionne pas cette terre-là pour Mishpat?
Why we don't mention all the... On mentionne pas les 7 fruits d'Israël. We only say Eretz, Zavat, Halav, Vash. We don't say about the 7 fruits.
Where in that pasuk?
In the pasuk when we describe Eretz Israel, Eretz, Zavat, Halav, Vash.
That's only one pasuk. We have
Okay.
the other pasuk, say the 7.
So Samuel, ça c'est un pasuk. Il y a des autres pasuk qui disent Eretz, Chita ou Seora, Geffen.
Alors, écoutez,
Il y a les deux pasuk.
n'essayons pas de contourner, la question est là. Pourquoi on ne les mentionne pas?
On les mentionne dans la Torah.
Et alors, pourquoi? C'est tout en question.
Ok, Razak, merci beaucoup
It's
Samuel.
actually, the milk over there is the milk of
Okay.
the dvash is tmarim, and the chalav
From the Gozim.
is zim. It's not even fruit, it's
Gozim.
an animal.
If you read the Rashi, actually, Rashi explain, le Rashi il explique que quand tu parles de lait et de miel, le lait il fait référence au lait d'amande et le miel c'est le miel de date. J'ai trouvé la référence.